Right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I welcome everyone to this Zoom meeting on Sunday, 17th of January, 2021. And as you know, the topic of my talk today is Critical Thinking 3. I mentioned some of the references on this front slide, and I will deliver this one in English so that everyone can benefit. And in any case, these will go I will post these slides later on and also post the recording, the usual procedure. Now, before I go to the presentation outline, I'll go through a few preludes to this talk. First is the verse from the Quran. وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Now we are quite familiar with this verse, which is really the law of requital, that Allah created the heavens and the earth bil haq, a truth, so that everyone is recompensed for what they do and nobody is treated unjustly. Just we should keep in mind that whatever we do in life, we have a thought before it. And second is a part of a verse, very famous, Inna Allaha la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah does not change the state of a nation until they change what is within their own nafs or within their own thought process. Next is a small quote from this book, which I said earlier, 30 Days to Better Thinking and Better Living Through Critical Thinking by Al Alder and Richard Paul. Thinking is skilled work. It is not true that we are naturally endowed with the ability to think clearly and logically. Without learning how or without practicing, people with untrained minds should no more expect to think clearly and logically than those people who have never learned and never practiced can expect to find themselves good carpenters, golfers, bridge players, or pianists. So we need to learn to do something. So this is part of our daily experience in life. And next is the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your thinking. Now, this is a small diagram which says thinking, the key to thinking, feeling, and wanting. Wanting over here means desires. These are the three things which are linked together. Next is the interconnection. We have feelings here, we have desires here, our wants, and these do not correct themselves. That is, there is nothing inbuilt in them that they can find out whether the desire cannot find out itself whether it's a good desire or a bad desire. And same goes for the feeling. They can only change through thinking. And the last one in this one is it's about our individual thinking. Your thinking controls you and it controls your emotions, your decisions. And do you control your thinking, or should I say to myself, or do I control my thinking? So that is something to think about. Now the presentation outline is a quick review of critical thinking skills. If we remember under talk 2, I had covered 6 critical thinking skills. I'll just go over it quickly. The elements of thought. When a thought, what constitutes a thought? There are 8 parts of it. Universal intellectual standards, there are 9 of them. A checklist for reasoning, there are 8 points in that. Essential intellectual traits, that all the efforts which we are making of acquiring critical thinking, what intellectual traits it should terminate into. The problem of egocentric thinking, that is our default position, which we see people around us. The problem of sociocentric thinking, that same, when come together, they create a sociocentric thinking. Then is envisioning critical societies. What sort of critical societies will emerge if people, majority is on critical thinking level. And the last one is envisioning a Quranic society, and then is on to critical thinking 4. So I will not conclude this talk today. We will have a critical thinking 4th one at some point in time. Now, if we remember, we had gone through 6 critical thinking skills, which were, interpretation, analysis, inference, evaluation, explanation, and self-regulation. And I had quoted an acronym for that, which was I is I. So we should keep it in mind that these skills we use to develop our critical thinking skills, our critical thinking mind. What are elements of thought? When something comes to our mind, we want to, for example, even this talk, I have to have a purpose. Then what is the question which I want to be answered? I should know that. Then what concepts which I already have and what change will come through this? Then is a point of view. What is my point of view before and after, or the point of view of others? What assumptions I'm going to have in our mind to formulate this talk? Implications and consequences, what this talk will take me or us into. That is, what will be its implications, what will be its consequences. And then on what information it will be based. There is no order here. It is just the way human thoughts work. And important is that all these come together at the same time. We may not be able to separate these into its elements. So this is what we need to be aware of. Now, questions using the elements of thought. First is purpose. What am I trying to accomplish? What is my central aim, my purpose? Very important that whatever we are doing, we have to have a purpose behind it. We can call it an aim as well. Questions. What question am I raising? What question am I addressing? Am I considering the complexities in the question? So all of these may not be applicable to one particular thing which we are trying to do. And there could be more questions as well, but these are sample questions. Information. What information am I using coming to that conclusion? If I've concluded something, what information it is based on, so that if the information changes, conclusion will change. What experience have I had to support this claim? What information do I need to settle the question? Inferences and conclusions. What is the main idea here? Is there another way to interpret the information? Concepts. What is the main idea here? Can I explain this idea? Assumptions. What am I taking for granted? What assumption has led me to that conclusion? I will deal with this assumption in slightly more detail later on. Implications and consequences. If someone accepted my position, what would be the implications? What am I implying? Point of view. From what point of view am I looking at this issue? Is there another point of view I should consider? Now, this is important that people sometimes are so concentrated and intense in their own point of view that they ignore the others. And that is the way it works. Now, universal intellectual standards. If you Google it, these are universal, and people have agreed on that. The first one is clarity. Could you elaborate further? Could you give me an example? Could you illustrate what you mean? And we can check our own thinking as well as the thinking of others, and also any written assignments or anything we are dealing with, that the question of clarity. And then is a question of accuracy. How could we check on that? How could we find out if that is true? How could we verify or test that? We can apply it to all the media information and any information coming to us. Even if we are reading a book, we should look at that. Precision. Could you be more specific? Could you give me more details? Could you be more exact? Now, it could be our own self and others. And also we should look around that universe is very precise. Sometimes we look at things which are at random. They are not really at random. There are scales working behind it. Relevance. How does that relate to that problem? How does that bear on the question? How does that help us with the issue? Depth. Depth is vertical, that looking downwards. And if the things are not clear at the bottom and we are just looking superficially at the top, we can be mistaken and we can be deceived. What factors make this a difficult problem? What are some of the complexities of this question? What are some of the difficulties we need to deal with? Breadth. And in breadth, we can see far wider, in a wider perspective than in the depth. Do we need to look at this from another perspective? Do we need to consider another point of view? Do we need to look at this in other ways? Logic. Does all this make sense together? That is not individually. Of course, we should look at the individual as well as the collective logic of that. Does your first paragraph fit in with your last? Does what you say follow from the evidence? Thank you. Significance. Is this the most important problem to consider? Is this the central idea to focus on? Which of these facts are most important? Fairness. And finally, we have to be fair to others and fair to ourselves and fair to what we are doing. Do I have any vested interest in this issue? Our emotions and biases are terrible. We should be very, very watchful with that. Of course, the Quran repeatedly asks us to remove our biases. And these are very difficult. We'll come to that. Am I sympathetically representing the viewpoints of others? So one is that we have to listen to them and then consider them, and then considering any external criteria, reject it. Now, what I've done is I've tried to create an acronym for that, and I came up with this: significance of CRAP. All red are the first words: before, logic, fairness, and depth. If somebody can come up with a better one, welcome. Critical thinker is inquisitive, truth-seeking, confident in reasoning, open-minded, analytical, systematic, and judicious. So there's no order here. All of these should be included in defining a critical thinker. And that critical thinker is myself. That is how I look at it. That am I inquisitive? Am I judicious, truth-seeking, confident in reasoning, open-minded, analytical, and systematic? Now, assumptions. It is important that whatever we assume, we should be aware of it. And assumptions, these refer to anything that is taken for granted in the presentation of an argument. My assumption may not be accepted by others, so I should be aware of that. These may be facts, ideas, or beliefs that are not stated explicitly, but which underlie the argument. Without them, the same conclusion will not be possible. So assumptions lead us to some conclusion. Assumptions are of two types: explicit and implicit. Explicit are those which someone will state clearly or are evidently clear. For example, we make a plan about some population and we say the population increase will be 3%. Now, this is an explicit assumption. And if something does not happen, for example, if population goes up by 4% or 2%, we can accordingly adjust our plan. But implicit are very difficult to detect because people can hide their feelings, and sometimes people are making assumptions that they don't know themselves. For example, in the field or arena of religion, there are loads of assumptions which have no basis. So we should keep that in mind. Identify the underlying assumptions in any argument and opinion expressed either in writing or verbally. For example, media makes a lot of assumptions. We may not be surprised that all these media channels, they think very carefully that what impact their news or discussions will have on audiences. And same goes for news, speeches, talks, presentations, conversations, even our daily conversations. If we are a bit more alert, we can see that people are coming from different assumptions. And finally, scrutinize own assumptions, i.e. become extremely conscious of own thought process and ensure nothing is stated or uttered which cannot be verified by facts. If an assumption is discovered to be wrong, carry out its damage limitation ASAP. And this is taken from this book. Now, this is checklist for reasoning. All reasoning has a purpose. State your purpose clearly. Distinguish your purpose from related purposes. Check periodically to ensure you are still on target. Choose significant and realistic purpose. All reasoning is an attempt to figure something out, to settle some question, solve some problem. State the question at issue clearly and precisely. Express the question in several ways to clarify its meanings and scope. Break the question into sub-questions. Distinguish questions that have definitive answers from those that are a matter of opinion. Very important that we should look for opinions. A lot of time we hear people, I think, in my opinion, but against what standard? And from those that require consideration of multiple viewpoints. And same goes for us. If I express an opinion, it should be based on some facts, or I should let the others know what are my assumptions. All reasoning is based on assumptions. I've just mentioned it. All reasoning is done from some point of view. So we have to find it out. What is that point of view? What is the background? Why this particular news is being emphasized today? What is the purpose behind it? All reasoning is based on data, information, and evidence. So we must have data, information, and evidence. Otherwise, we should not accept. And same goes for us as well. When I present something, it should be based on that. All reasoning is expressed through and shaped by concepts and ideas. And then is all reasoning contains inferences or interpretations by which we draw conclusions and give meaning to data. So data is just raw information. We have to turn it into something useful or something evil. It's up to us. And this we see all around us in our daily life. All reasoning leads somewhere or has implications and consequences. Trace the implications and consequences that follow from your reasoning. It is primarily the law of requital is working. So we are familiar with that and we know it. Now, all this should take into some intellectual traits or virtues. And these are intellectual humility, fair-mindedness, intellectual courage, intellectual autonomy, intellectual integrity, intellectual empathy, confidence in reason, and intellectual perseverance. So whatever I have shown previously, it should take into these intellectual traits within us. And that is why it is called acquiring higher consciousness. So there is no order here. All of these should be acquired and we can check it ourselves. First is intellectual humility is being aware of limits of one's own knowledge. That is, we should know that we don't know everything in life. We are progressively moving forward. Whatever we are learning is through reading and then understanding it. So knowledge has to turn into some kind of an understanding and then we share it with others. So humility means that I should not claim that I know everything in the universe or in the world, because if I know everything, then what am I going to do in the hereafter? Intellectual courage, we need courage to be true to our own thinking. That is, we know something, then we should be able to put it forward. There should be no cowardice here that holding on to information which I know is based on facts should be shared. If I have a good understanding of the Quran or somebody else has a good understanding of the Quran, they should come forward and share it. So this is where the intellectual courage comes in. Intellectual empathy. I should not only think about my point of view, I should also think about the point of view of others and look at it from their point of view. If people are expressing some opinion or some thinking or some facts, I should have a patience to listen to them. Intellectual autonomy, rational control of one's beliefs, values, and inferences. Very important. This is opposite of social-centric thinking, that where we say my group is always right, my country is right, my family is right. It's not a question of my family and others' families. It is a question of autonomy, that whatever I'm presenting should be solid and should be based on facts, not on merely opinions or assumptions which cannot be supported. Intellectual integrity, to practice what one advocates for others, need to be true to one's own thinking. This is very interesting. I'm going to have in the fourth segment of this critical thinking, go over these intellectual traits in more detail. While reading through this one of the lines which I came across is that we should, whatever we mean to say, we should also mean to act on it. We expect very high standards from others, and at the same time, we forget our own self. And there is a verse of the Quran on that you profess to others what you don't practice yourself. Intellectual perseverance. If we are convinced and our traits have developed to that level, that is insights and truth, in spite of difficulties, obstacles, and frustrations, firm adherence to rational principles despite irrational opposition of others. We all know it in the Quranic context that Quran has very clearly stated that if you are convinced of this truth, this haqq, then pursue it. And time will tell who is right and who is wrong. So there will be opposition. So intellectual perseverance means that if we are developed to that extent that where we know that what we are saying is based on evidence and facts, then we should not compromise. And confidence and reason in the long run, one's own higher interests and those of mankind at large will be best served by giving the freest play to reason. And this is why the Quran repeatedly says, "Afala taqilun, afala yatadabbarun." So reason is something which is very important. And last is fair-mindedness, need to treat all viewpoints alike without reference to one's own feelings or vested interests. Now, this might give rise to some questions in our mind, and we can discuss it in question-answer session. Remember, we should remember that these are written by those or researched by those who are not Quranic, who do not have Quranic self. So there will be gaps here. Now, bringing all these together, the intellectual standards, when applied to elements of thought and reasoning, these help to develop intellectual traits. And with that, then comes the critical thinking skills. So aim is to have these intellectual traits within us, and that will develop into a critical mind or a critical thinker. So these are just schematically illustrated. Now, I thought at the end that just to have a quick look on problem of egocentric thinking, because there are some points over there which we experience in our life. Probably we have ourselves been through it. Egocentric thinking results from the unfortunate fact that humans do not naturally consider the rights and needs of others. See, the yatim and miskeen is come over here. So these guys are projecting this critical thinking with a view to make a better world. But we should keep in mind that those who do not want a better world, they want to have their own objectives in mind and want to follow the wrong path. They can use these critical skills for their own ends as well. So it's the application which matters. It doesn't make any difference. Critical thinking itself will not force us to do good. That is, the decision will be with the I who has acquired this critical thinking. Now, some of the examples are, it's true because I believe it. This is innate egocentrism. I assume that what I believe is true. And we see examples of this. Second is, it is true because we believe it. So if one person believes wrong, but he's got hundreds of them around him, so they all get together and they say, it is true because we believe it. And how can all of us be wrong? And the same argument is presented about history, that how can history be wrong? I remember I talked to someone and I said that this thing reported in the history is against the Quran. And he said, no, but how can history be wrong? So this is something which we experience in our life when we pass on the message of the Quran. Next, it is true because I want to believe it. This is very interesting. We see that and experience this. It's true because I have always believed it. So it has become a truth because I have always believed it. And this becomes the position of particularly of those people who are in the later part of life. And I experience it when I'm interacting with them. It is true because it is in my selfish interest to believe it. Over here, at least this egocentric fellow is honest. He says, that's fine, I stick to it. Now, problem of sociocentric thinking, the uncritical tendency to place one's culture, nation, religion above all others. And we see it all around us. The uncritical tendency to select self-serving positive descriptions of ourselves and negative descriptions of others. Whole country says everyone else is wrong, we are right. I was looking at one clip yesterday where they said that every problem in the world is because of Russia and China. We are angels. The tendency to blindly conform to group restrictions, many of which are arbitrary or coercive. The failure to think beyond the traditional prejudices of one's culture, very difficult to get rid of it. It's a massive chain around the necks of country after country. The failure to distinguish universal ethics from relativistic cultural requirements and taboos. We tend to forget that people in different parts of the world have their own culture. And as our culture is dear to us, so is their own culture to them. The failure to realize that mass media in every culture shapes the news from the point of view of that culture. So this is obvious. They get paid as well, so they have to pursue that goal where they get more money. The failure to think historically and anthropologically, and hence trapped in current ways of thinking. They forget that what happened in the past, and people behave as if today is the only time where human beings are living in this life. The failure to see sociocentric thinking as a significant impediment to intellectual development. So sociocentric and egocentric are hurdles in acquiring critical thinking. Envisioning critical societies. Humans have the capacity to be rational and fair, but this capacity must be developed. It will be significantly developed only if critical societies emerge. Critical societies will develop only to the extent that critical thinking is viewed as essential to living a reasonable and fair-minded life. So we should, if we do not acquire critical thinking, we cannot have a critical society. CT is routinely taught, consistently fostered. And about this education, I was reading something from someone who said that deliberately the education system is created so that labor class is produced, a non-thinking class. And whatever they are taught, they just follow it. And I've been through a military academy, I know it. And I've been also guilty of teaching the same. The problematics of thinking are an abiding concern. Closed-mindedness is discouraged and open-mindedness is encouraged. Like we tell children that you are to not to speak, but just listen. Egocentric and sociocentric thinking are recognized as an irrational, as an irritation in social life. Children are routinely taught that the rights and needs of others are equal to their own. So this is a critical, in my view, this is the bottom line, that children who are the future generation of any society, they should be taught right at the beginning, the rights and needs of others are equal to their own. Of course, we have to teach them all the permanent values. Envisioning critical societies, a multicultural worldview is fostered. Whatever world we see, it is inhabited by all types of people with their own culture and ideas and their own egocentric thinkings, and we have to accept it. People are encouraged to think for themselves and discouraged from uncritically accepting the thinking or behavior of others. Straight. People study and diminish irrational thought. That is, they discourage it. That is, they of course, logically, not through bluntly replying someone that you are wrong. You have to put forward your own point of view. People internalize universal intellectual standards, which I have mentioned. If we want critical societies, we must create them. Now, envisioning Quranic society, critical thinking society will help to lead to the Quranic society. Over here, I put down some thoughts. This is not a comprehensive list, but I thought just to get some comparison, if we have a critical society and we turn it into a Quranic society, this is what it will have. Understand the intrinsic value of each human being as a being possessing a self with choice and intent. Continuously, each individual to be aware of it, that if I have a choice and intent, the others have choice and intent as well. Each human being is equal at the level of I, and the life does not end with physical death. Very important that what I have, all of you have the same I. All 7 billion human beings have the same I, and the life is not going to end with physical death. And then we can deal with it with that premise in mind. Educated and trained in the permanent values and their application in their daily life. Tolerant of other cultures, religious belief systems, and secular views. Have a good understanding of the word belief systems. Important. We should remember that people will come from different backgrounds. In a world which is divided, divisive, might is right, this is going to be the case. A model society based on the permanent values, and the value will be there is no compulsion in being, complete freedom in making their choice and permitted to practice it. Full opportunities for all to learn Iman and what it means, providing a complete rational basis of the human creation and the concept of Allah based on the divine attributes. Provides opportunity for free thinking in all aspects of human life, which help to expand the horizons of human intellect and consciousness, which are inaccessible to the critical thinking domain. So this is superior to critical thinking domain. Now, there are 4 types of individuals we can define from here. First one is basic level human being with minimum opportunities in life, just struggles to live through daily life created by the human intellect and sees no hope of any change in his life. Most human beings live this kind of life across the planet under the man-made system. So this is the man-made system's position. So we should be very conscious of it, that this is an equal human being who has unfortunately not been able to, make use of his potentials. Next is rational level human being who takes advantage of the opportunities available in a society and is realist. Conforms to the rational standards of the society, law-abiding citizen who gets on life without too much questioning. He is also emotive and relaxed among his social circle at home. So this is also the state we see around. And next is critical thinker. He is educated and trained in critical thinking. Of course, he has made an effort to acquire it and is extremely rational. But without the Quranic Iman and values, is aware of the traits of the basic level as well as of the rational level. Very productive and possesses higher level of consciousness. So this critical thinker has emerged out of these 2 states. And so the next one will emerge from all these 3 states. Quranic thinker, aware of all these statuses, plus understands and willingly manifests divine attributes and strives to establish the system of deen by first having a Quranic self, works in harmony with those who have similar self. Now, these are the stages of development towards the master thinker, where it becomes a second nature. So initially we will be trying to go through it and make an effort, but at a stage will come when we become that. First is unreflective thinker, unaware of the problems, just getting on with his life. Challenge thinker who faces the problems and then try to solve them, then forgets about it. The moment his problem is solved, he says, that's it, I'm all right, Jack. Beginning thinker trying to improve without regular practice. Then is practitioner thinking, this practicing thinker, this is where he starts making an effort. We need education and training for that. Advanced thinker, advance in our practice, conscious practice. So he's the one who keeps reminding himself. And then it becomes his nature. And the Quranic thinker will come somewhere here above that. That is, all of these will be in front of him. And he will make full concerted effort to get Allah's help. The 3 possible shades of a society. Number 1 is a basic society. Then is a rational society. Then is a critical thinking society. So if you can relate it to those 4 individuals and what was said before that. So these are some of the traits which I have just jotted them down. And the last one is the Quranic society. Very high level of consciousness, highly intellectual and reasoning, rational and critical thinking members using all skills, focused on the welfare of mankind within the permanent values. People managing their affairs fully conscious of the divine attributes and manifest these in their daily display of conduct and character. Have acquired absolute conviction in the truthfulness of their cause. Have managed to create an education system which helps to educate and train children who have acquired and developed a Quranic self and are also aware of his presence within their own self. This is very important. Just, it should not be vague or in the air that, okay, this is how the self should be. It should not be a third person. It should be, I have acquired it. We have acquired it. And that is why we are together and moving forward. Remember that verse of the Quran, Tasimu bihablillahi jami'an, and then it says, He united your hearts. So unity of hearts, that feeling vibrating together is absolutely critical in a Quranic society. And critical thinking can help us do that. In summary, this is a society with most members having a self as noted in chapter 112. If you remember, Dr. Hamid Mian gave a lecture on this. and which represents Allah's system of rububiyyat in the world and in the society. No human being obeys another human being. The freedom which one gets by that feeling that there is nothing between myself and Allah, that is the feeling of true freedom. And they all enjoy living their life without any fear and huzn, within the freedom provided by the system of deen. In this society, the needs of the body are adequately met and opportunities are made available for the development of the self based on Iman as explained in the Quran 2:177. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your patient hearing, and we will go into question and answer session now. I hope it was not boring.
Ijaz sir,
I think I've remained within my time. I thought I will take 15 minutes, but
Ijaz sir, can I comment on something?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Overall, I think it's a great lecture, great conversation about critical thinking and the benefits of it. I fully agree with you. I think some of us are more critical in our thinking, some are less, but that's how it is. This is reality. But the thing which I want to just point out a little bit, and again, this is no time to debate this because we don't have time. We may do it separately, one-on-one in more details. But I think the way you are presenting the whole end results towards the end, how this Quranic people and Quranic society and Quranic critical thinkers, you are making them separate from the rest of the world. I do not understand that message from Quran at all. The evolution of human self, which Quran talks about, which gives certain benefits to the society, that's wonderful to know. But in reality, society will have people who are more basic thinkers, people who you cannot eliminate them. So this finding a kind of nirvana society, that it will be some unique set of people who are critical thinkers, Quranic society people, and all of them, all members of the society will meet those traits. Absolutely hallucination, never will happen. I cannot see it in any picture, and I don't see Quran asking us for that. So we have to kind of be a little bit more temperate and understand what Quranic expectations are for us, for ourselves, and for our society. Of course, we have to figure out what the right ways will be. And again, this conversation is not for that. We can talk later. But we should remember that there is no freaky, unique set of people will evolve at some point in time who will say, oh, these are the Quranic people now. Everybody else is junk. They are like basic people, rational people, smart critical thinkers, but no. This is a unique set of people who are just meeting all these traits, and somehow they are just going to run the whole world at one point in time. I have my serious concerns with communication of that and putting a point of view which can confuse and make this whole unachievable. I mean, there is no practical way to make this happen. But anyway, this was just at least my thought for food for thought for people to think, and maybe me and you can discuss and elaborate on this more, and maybe we'll do another lecture on that at some point in time. But thanks for doing this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Arif Bhai. And I have noted your points, and I would like that in our next talk, we should be, or a few more talks, we should be able to elaborate on what has been stated here. And I agree with you that the whole world will never be a critical thinker. There's no doubt in that. That's a practical aspect of it. But the point which I was trying to make in the light of the Quran was, if you remember, there's a verse of Surah Al Imran, Ukhrijat Nas, that we have, you have emerged out of mankind as a Jamaat, as a people who forbid evil and promote good. So my whole emphasis was that that critical thinking in itself should take us to something bigger and higher within the light of the Quran. If you remember, these two guys, who have written this book, they have also mentioned that we should have a mankind or a world which should be for everyone, not just for the few. And that is their motivation. So in order to achieve that, merely critical thinking will not be of much help, because the same people as I said, that critical thinkers are on both sides of the dividing line. They are good people as well as bad people. You can use this critical thinking to plant evil and promote evil in the world. And the same is for the good people. But the point over here, which we need to keep in mind, and I think I will not mention that today, but Quran asks us to take us thinking to that level where we become eligible for the help of Allah. Where Quran says, Tansurullah yansurukum, that you help Allah's cause and we will help you. So critical thinking, in my view, in my understanding, and all of you can differ with that, is that you have to raise that level to that level of understanding where we can apply it to the Quranic values and its system. So that is the one. But I agree with you, it will never come to everyone. That I think I had made it clear that basic level human beings will be there always, even in a system of being. Sorry, Vadraman bhai. Ji bhai.
No, what I wanted to say was that the point is that human beings alone cannot achieve that end goal. That's why Allah has sent Wahi, because our intellect, and no matter how much we think, cannot achieve what is really needed by this human society to grow, and so that everybody's needs are fulfilled and there is no poor and no needy, and all those objectives which God has given to the Islamic society, that you should achieve these objectives. However, having said that, now that Allah has given us the Quran, and we know that permanent values are the values which will take us in that direction, we need critical thinking. We need to critically think where we are, why we are here, why we are not going forward. For example, today, state of Muslims all over the world is very poor. I mean, they're at the bottom of the human chain, at the bottom of the human level of intellect, economically, or otherwise. Even brotherhood, we say, Innama mu'minun ukhwa, but are the mu'min ukhwa? They're bombing each other, killing each other, trying to take revenge from each other for stupid arguments that you said this and I said this, and I believe in prophet had a shadow and you believe no prophet had shadow, and things like this. So the thing is, people, we need critical thinking, but it should be directed by Quran. That is the way to go forward. There will always, as long as the Quran is there, you have to critically think about it. And human beings, I mean, the child when is born does not know good from bad. So every is a continuous education process. And this education process, you have to teach the children, but as they grow up and they get exposed to different environments and different societies or different physical locations, critical thinking is always needed. We cannot go forward without critical thinking. So that is, I just wanted to
Thank you very much. Any other question or comment?
say something.
Shama Bhan came first. Let's go there, and then I go to Brother Atiq.
मैं आपकी सारी प्रेजेंटेशन जो थी बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग थी, लेकिन जो कमेंट्स प्रीवियस मेंबर्स ने दिए हैं वो भी अपनी जगह एक्सप्लोर करने वाले हैं। और मेरा क्वेश्चन मैं थोड़ा सा मिस कर गई थी कि इस चीज को, और मेरी समझ में नहीं आया कि ये जो है हाउ वी कैन actually assess the accuracy of the information, क्योंकि जो सोशल मीडिया है वो इतना कुछ फैला हुआ है और आए दिन इतनी इतनी बातें करता है, तो उसका कोई खास तरीका है कि हम उसको एक्सप्लोर कर सकें कि कौन सी बात सच्ची है और कौन सी झूठी है, वो किस तरीके से असेस करें? थोड़ा सा मुझे अगर इस पे रोशनी डालें आप।
ठीक है, थैंक यू बहन। उसका थैंक यू फॉर आस्किंग योर क्वेश्चन। जो आप जो कह रही हैं कि जो सोशल मीडिया और वो बम्बार्डेड है, तो उसमें ये है कि वो जो سوسائٹی جس قسم کی ہم نے کریٹ کی ہوئی ہے ہیومن مائنڈ نے یا ہیومن انٹلیکٹ نے، اس میں وی ہیو ٹو لک ایٹ ایوری انفارمیشن اسکیپٹیکلی کہ یہ انفارمیشن جو میرے پاس آئی ہے، یاد ہے اس میں جو یونیورسل انٹلیکچوئل اسٹینڈرڈس میں 2 پوائنٹ تھے، بریڈتھ اینڈ ڈیپتھ. آپ یہ دیکھیں کہ یہ جو انفارمیشن میرے سامنے آئی ہے اس میں ازمپشن کیا ہے. میں آپ کو چھوٹی سی اگزامپل دیتا ہوں کہ یہ کہا جاتا ہے کہ جی دنیا میں پاورٹی جو ہے وہ انکریز ہو رہی ہے، ٹھیک ہے جی، اور امیر آدمی ایٹ دا سیم ٹائم امیر ہو رہا ہے. تو دیکھیں نا، جب امیر آدمی امیر ہوگا تو کوئی نہ کوئی اس دن غریب بھی ہو جائے گا. تو یہ کہنا صرف کہ جی غریب غریب ہو رہا ہے، وہ اس لیے غریب ہو رہا ہے کہ جو انڈر ڈیولپڈ کنٹریز جو ہیں وہ کام ٹھیک نہیں کر رہے. ٹھیک ہے، جب آپ دیکھیں تھوڑا سا اس کو زیادہ ایکسپلور کریں، آپ دیکھیں گے کہ اس ملک کا جو لیڈر ہے وہ کسی اور نے اپوائنٹ کیا ہوا ہے اور وہ خاص مقصد کے لیے وہاں پر ہے. تو یہ جو چیزیں ہوتی ہیں ازمپشنز، اسی طرح آپ اپنی نارمل لائف میں دیکھ لیں، ازیوم کر لیں. یہ فار ایگزامپل قرآن نے کہا ہے کہ یتیم مسکین جو ہے وہ اس کو کریٹ کرنا جو ہے وہ فالسیفائی کرنا ہے دین کو. اس کا مطلب یہ ہو گیا کہ غریب اور مسکین دنیا سے کبھی بھی دور نہیں ہو سکیں گے جب تک کہ ہم وہ نظام نہیں لے کے آئیں گے جو کہ قرآن کہہ رہا ہے. بڑا سمپل ہے، آپ چیک کر لیں نا کہ اوور دا پیریڈ آف ٹائم آپ کسی بھی غریب بچے کو، وہ جو ایک انٹلیکچوئل اسٹینڈرڈ ہے، انٹلیکچوئل ایمپتھی والا، اس کو لے آئیں. سو آل دیز جو ٹریٹس بتائے گئے ہیں، جو بھی ریزننگ دی گئی ہے، یہ اگر ہم جب اپلائی کریں، یہ مشکل کام ہے، آسان کام نہیں ہے. آپ ویٹ کریں، کبھی بھی جمپ ٹو کنکلوژن نہ کریں. کوئی بھی آپ کو انفارمیشن آتی ہے، آپ کہیں ویٹ اے منٹ، یہ جو بات اس نے کی ہے اس کے پیچھے حقیقت کیا ہے. دیکھیں وہ مومن تو نہیں ہے نا. موسٹ آف دیز جو آپ کے سامنے میڈیا والے، سوشل میڈیا والے جو بھی وہ کہہ رہے ہیں، ان میں سے مومن تو آپ کو کم ہی کوئی نظر آئے گا. تو جب وہ مومن نہیں ہے، کریٹیکل تھنکر بھی نہیں ہے، تو پھر آپ نے اس کو غور سے دیکھنا ہے کہ یہ بیسک لیول کا ہیومن بینگ ہے، اس کا مقصد کیا ہے، کیوں یہ کہہ رہا ہے. بس چھوٹی سی بات، آپ کے سامنے ایونٹس ہو رہے ہیں دنیا میں اور وہ ایک دوسرے کو اکیوز کر رہے ہیں، پورے ملک دوسرے ملکوں کو اکیوز کر رہے ہیں اور خود بھی وہی کر رہے ہیں جو دوسرا کر رہا ہے. تو آپ نے، میں نے کیا کرنا ہے، آپ نے اپنے آپ کو ڈیٹیچ کر کے اس کو آبزرو کرنا ہے کیئرفلی کہ وہ کیا کہہ رہا ہے. اور اس کے لیے اس میں قرآن آپ کی ہیلپ کر رہا ہے. قرآن دو ہی کلیئرلی ڈیمارکیٹ کر رہا ہے، دو قسم کی تھنکنگ. ایک وہ ہے جو فالو کرتے ہیں اپنی ڈیزائرز کو، دوسرے جو ہیں اپنی ڈیزائرز کو لے کے آتے ہیں ود ان دا ڈومین آف دا پرماننٹ ویلیوز. سو کریٹیکل تھنکنگ جو ہے یہ آپ کو اس قسم کی سوچ آپ کے مائنڈ میں ڈیولپ کر دے گی. ایفرٹ بنائیں ہم تو اس میں یہ ہے کہ آپ ہر چیز کو، اس کا مطلب کریٹیکل اس طرح نہیں ہے کہ آپ فار دا سیک آف کسی چیز کو کرٹیسزم کریں. نو، کریٹیکل تھنکنگ کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ کسی بھی چیز کو ڈیٹیل میں ایویڈنس ڈھونڈیں، غور فکر کریں. فار ایگزامپل کوئی کہتا ہے آئی تھنک، تو آپ اسی وقت الرٹ ہو جائیں کہ واٹ ہی از تھنکنگ، از ہی رائٹ اور ناٹ. somebody says in my opinion، آپ کے سامنے یہ پولیٹیکل منسٹرز وغیرہ آتے ہیں، وہ فریکوینٹلی کہتے ہیں آئی تھنک، دوسرا کہتا ہے ان مائی اوپینین. وہ بھائی آپ کی اوپینین یا تھنکنگ جو ہے وہ کس چیز پہ بیسڈ ہے، وہ کیا assumption ہے اس کے پیچھے، کیا فیکٹس ہیں آپ کے پاس.
ٹھیک ہے، تھینک یو ویری مچ.
جی کسی اور، کوئی اور؟ جی سرفراز بھائی.
ڈاکٹر اعجاز بہت اچھا آپ نے کیا ہے، ویری نائس. اچھا یہ ایک تو ویری امپورٹنٹ پوائنٹ جو آپ نے کہا، وی ہیو ٹو تھنک اباؤٹ اٹ. جو آپ کی جو تھنکنگ ہے نا، یور تھنکنگ، you think yourself or is it controlled by somebody, or is it possible that the environment we live in, uska thinking jo process hai, it depends what environment.
آپ کی آواز بریک اپ ہو رہی ہے، تھوڑا سا مائک کو ٹھیک کریں. ہاں
آپ جس انوائرمنٹ میں رہ رہے ہیں، آپ کا تھنکنگ کا جو پروسیس ہے، your thinking process, it depends in the environment you're living in. Also the other point is, do you think yourself or somebody is control your thinking? So that's the two. And the other point, I think the first brother spoke about, he gave you a comment. I think I have listened to one of the scholars. He was saying the real Mominees are the scientists who discovered things. And, those are, like you're talking about the critical thinking. I think people who are really doing research and doing critical thinking based on Quran and progressing themselves. I think they are the real, mu'minin, I would say. What do you think about that?
I will not, Brother Sarfraz, thank you very much for your question, because the reason is I will not go in this question answer on that side, because that's a very big area. I am aware of what you're saying. I will not go in this. I'm sorry for that. The reason is that it's a very big subject. We are over here exploring a small part of the non-Quranic system, what conclusion they have come to in terms of critical thinking. So that was the aim of this presentation, that we see that human intellect has gone to what extent to figure out how to think through unbiased, without our bias coming into it, how to get rid of egocentric basic default position of human beings. And based on that, we can look around the world. The Quranic flavor I added at the end, deliberately, should I say, just to give a flavor of that, not to explore it in detail. And these are the difficulties which a lot of our members and others face it. And I have also faced it at some point in time. And so we go through an evolutionary process, as Arif Bhai said earlier. So should I postpone this, or we can have one-to-one discussion on that? Otherwise, it's essentially explaining the whole psychology, human psychology behind the system of being, and then going into creation and what is the purpose of human creation. And those people who look at the scientific side only and do not take self into it, then it becomes a very big subject. Is that okay?
That's fine. I agree with you. But can we touch something very important? I think everybody would be interested in this. Is this part of our thinking process? Is it really depends on the environment you're living in?
Environment, yes. Environment does affect. We are a product of our environment. For example, I was a born Sunni Muslim, and I remained that till the age of 40, 41. So, and I was a very staunch supporter of Hadith. In fact, I still repent for I'm rebutting someone who said that the stoning to death is not in the Quran, and I said it is in the Hadith, and the poor guy left the verse. And so it is part of environment, because remember that egocentric thinking, I believe in it because it suits me to believe in it. So that was the kind of attitude people have. So we have to understand that.
So how are you going to convince somebody who's living in this kind of environment and do critical thinking according to what Quran actually teaches?
We cannot convince anyone. Let us take this out of our mind. We have a choice and intent. Allah can't convince them. You and me can never convince them. People have to find out their own need. That is what critical thinking is doing. Even this critical thinking, people read it and do not come to it because it doesn't suit them. And there is a reason behind it. I will deal with it in my fourth lecture.
Right, but is it possible for them to come on board?
Yes, okay. It is. It is available to everyone. It is a choice.
Thank you.
It is a choice. Yes, Atiq Rahman bhai.
Hey, mashallah, your talk was very comprehensive.
Thank you.
And I think you made your points very well. The only thing I can say is that there was too much information in too short a time for assimilation properly. And some of this, I wish that some slides had stayed longer so I could read through, because some are slow readers, they cannot read through all of quickly. Anyhow, I think that every human being is born with certain amount of thinking. But as you said, it's a learned skill. It needs to be practiced consciously. Just like you learn music and you do riyaz, you have to do riyaz of thinking. And this thinking has to be taught from the childhood. I think that we start critical thinking usually when you get to 50 or 60 years old, because by that time you have achieved a certain, through hit and trial and error method, you get to a certain point you can do some kind of critical thinking. Not exactly like you described it, but everybody processes the information in their own minds somewhat like in a critical way. But my thinking is that we need to have this part of the syllabus. We need to have this taught in schools, in homes, as a subject, as something that needs to be done. And nobody ever talks to children about thinking. So this is what I'm trying to say, is that this is where we need to focus for the younger generation to grow up with critical thinking, to learn better and better, and by the time they get to our age, they are experts in it. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. First, my apology for going through some of the slides very quickly. And the reason was that I knew that it needs more detail, but first is time constraint. Second is it's a difficult subject, to be fair. And it was difficult even for me when I was reading through it. It took me, previously I had gone through this mini guidebook or whatever they call it, but miniature guide. But this time I went into the detail of these points in more detail and brought them together, that what exactly we are trying to inculcate within our personality. So what will happen is that this subject is not going to go away, as we are not going to go away from this platform. We are all together in it. So we will refer to it more frequently again and again as we discuss other things. And I will ask other presenters as well, whoever comes on the platform to deliver a talk, to please refer to it. Because gradually, to become an accomplished thinker, accomplished critical thinker, we have to keep reminding ourselves, because human beings are very forgetful. We are in the present, we forget our past very quickly. That's why we make mistakes. And that is why history repeats itself. So all of us have to make an effort, which includes myself, to remain very vigilant, very conscious of it, that these critical thinking, different aspects of it, universal standards and skills and reasoning, and these have to be remembered and then applied. There is far more to it. One of the things which I will ask everyone is to remain vigilant is about egocentric thinking. We should never ever let our own ego come into it. If I made a mistake, I should raise my hand and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. If I have a wrong assumption, I should change that assumption into the right one. And number three, we should not be gullible that whatever media throws on us, we should just accept it. We should be very skeptical. In fact, I'm preparing a talk in the light of the Quran on COVID-19 as well. And I'm coming across, because it's something very intense and needs a lot of concentration, I'm coming across a lot of points which need our very, very careful attention. This world has gone into an accelerated mode of law of requital. In a very short period, you will see quite big changes coming in the world. Timescale, I'm not sure, but be prepared for that. It is coming in the light of the Quran. I'm seeing, and of course, all the information which we are gathering through YouTube. So we are living in a social media age in which there's a lot of information thrown at us, and this critical thinking should help us to separate the useful from the useless. And we should be just aware of it and not to be drawn into it. We should see the world passing in front of us while we are living in it. So these are the two time scales in which we have to deal with it. Thank you very much. Sorry, there was some other.
Rubina wants to.
Yes, Rubina. Arif bhai, मैं आपकी तरफ आता हूँ, बहन रुबीना कोई सवाल पूछ.
I just had a very small comment to make, but better.
I'll come to you after.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
जी बहन रुबीना.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम.
जी, आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन तो डेफिनेटली बहुत अच्छी थी. यूजुअली आपके सेमिनार्स में प्रेजेंटेशन तो वाकई बहुत अच्छी होती है, लेकिन जो चीज़ मैं एक कमेंट अपना देना चाहती हूँ, जो मैं सबसे ज़्यादा जहाँ से मैं लर्न करती हूँ, वो लोगों के कमेंट्स और जो उनके क्वेश्चंस होते हैं. दैट पार्ट इज میں اس کو بہت اس سے مجھے لرننگ زیادہ ہوتی ہے ٹو بی آنیسٹ، کیونکہ آپ کی برین کی اتنی کیپیسٹی تو نہیں ہوتی نا کہ آپ جیسے آپ کی پوری پریزنٹیشن کے سارے پوائنٹس یاد رہ جائیں. تو میں جو بات ایک تو یہ بات میں کہنا چاہتی ہوں کہ دس از اے ویری گڈ ایفرٹ یو میکنگ، اور خاص طور پہ یہ جو جس طرح کے لوگ آپ کے اس سیمینار کو اٹینڈ کرتے ہیں، چونکہ وہ خود ویل لرنڈ لوگ ہیں، تو اس سے ہم لوگوں کی لرننگ میں ان کے کوشچن سے زیادہ لرننگ ہوتی ہے. اور خاص طور پہ بھی آج کی پریزنٹیشن میں بھی جو بھی پوائنٹس کمنٹس لوگوں نے بنائے دے ور کوائٹ تھاٹ پرووکنگ. یس. تو اب یہاں سے میرے ملتے جلتے کوشچن کچھ لوگوں نے کیے، اور اسی طرح کا میرا تھا، تو میں اس وجہ سے ہینڈ ریز کر کے پھر لور کر لیتی تھی کہ یہ تو انہوں نے پوچھ لیا ملتا جلتا. تو تو اب میں یہ کہنا چاہ رہی ہوں کہ میں اس بات کو میں خود بھی اس پہ کافی سوچ رہی ہوں، اور ریسرچ بھی کر رہی ہوں، پڑھ بھی رہی ہوں، سن بھی رہی ہوں لوگوں کو، کہ تھاٹ جو ہے، تھنکنگ جو ہے، وہ تھنکنگ پروسیس، اس کو ایجوکیٹ کیا جا سکتا ہے. یس. لیکن پھر نو، کیونکہ بایولوجیکلی کچھ چیزیں جو ہمارے ڈی این اے میں ہوتی ہیں، جن کا ہمارے تھاٹس کے ساتھ بھی تعلق ہوتا ہے، تو وہ کچھ چیزیں ایسی ہوتی ہیں جن کو آپ وہ ایجوکیٹ نہیں ہوئی بھی ہوتی، اور وہ کسی میں ہوتی ہیں. تو میں یہ کہنا چاہوں گی کہ اگر آپ کے یہ جو انٹلیکچوئل گروپ آف پیپل میں کوئی بندہ ہمیں صحیح پراپر ایکسپلین کرے کہ یہ تھنکنگ پروسیس جو ہے یہ کیا ہے، اس کی بایولوجیکل سائڈ، اس کی سائیکولوجیکل سائڈ، اس کا مطلب اس پروسیس کو ایکسپلین کیا جائے کہ ایجوکیٹ کیا جا سکتا ہے. اور اگر کیا جا سکتا ہے، میں سمجھتی ہوں، میں کنونسڈ ہوں کہ کیا جا سکتا ہے، کیونکہ ڈفرینٹ سوسائٹیز کے لوگوں کی تھاٹ پروسیس ڈفرینٹ ہوتی ہے، تھنکنگ ڈفرینٹ ہوتی ہے. تو اس پوائنٹ آف ویو سے مجھے لگتا ہے کہ یہ کیا جا سکتا ہے. لیکن کچھ اور ایویڈنسز ایسی ہوتی ہیں جس سے لگتا ہے کہ there is something else to it. So I hope کہ
تھینک یو ویری مچ. آپ کا پوائنٹ بڑا ویلڈ ہے. یہ آپ کو خوشی ہوگی کہ جب میں نے یہ پریزنٹیشن ڈلیور کرنی تھی تو میں نے اس میں جو کوئکلی آئی وینٹ تھرو اٹ بیکاز آف کنسٹرینٹ آف ٹائم، تو اس لیے مجھے علم تھا کہ کویسچن آنسر میں یہ دیز تھنگز ول بی پکڈ اپ. سو آئی ایم گلیڈ کہ آپ کی آبزرویشن ایبسلیوٹلی اسپاٹ آن ہے. My apology for going through some of these points quickly, لیکن اس میں یہ ہے نا کہ کچھ ایفرٹ ہم سب نے خود بھی تو بنانی ہے. اگر آپ کو یاد ہو وہ منیچر گائیڈ جو ہے وہ میں نے پوسٹ کی ہوئی ہے. جو آپ کا سیکنڈ پوائنٹ ہے اس کے متعلق ایک ڈاکٹر لپٹن ہے، ان کی میں ایک پریزنٹیشن بڑی اچھی تھی، بایولوجیکل بیسس جو تھی اس کے اوپر، فرام امریکہ، وہ میں سرچ کر کے یوٹیوب سے آپ کو میں بھیج دوں گا.
تھینک یو.
وہ پلیز آپ ضرور دیکھ لیں. اور میری اپالوجی ٹو ادرس دیٹ اٹ از related to our seminar subject. آج کل مجھے ویسے بھی الرٹ ہونا پڑتا ہے کیونکہ some of our members then they are rightly they pointed out that we should keep it focused towards what is being discussed in the seminar. So I'll try to put two what do you call clips. They are a bit longer, about 1 hour کے ہیں وہ. ایک ڈاکٹر چوپڑا ہے، دیپک چوپڑا، ان کی ہے. آپ I will put my comment as well which part you should see. Because these are long and I don't expect people to sit over it for 1 hour and waste their time. And Dr. Lipton. So I'll put that and hopefully that will answer some of your questions and then we can come back and discuss it here again.
Thank you.
Okay. بھائی عارف نے بات کرنی. جی بھائی.
میں صرف ایک چھوٹا سا کامنٹ کرنا چاہ رہا تھا.
جی پلیز.
ہم کریٹیکل تھنکنگ کی ڈسکس کر رہے ہیں، اس کو ایز اے ٹرم یوز کرتے ہیں میں لیکچر میں. I'm speaking in Urdu because there was some question in Urdu also.
جی اردو میں بتائیں.
I can speak in English so everybody can get it. We talk about critical thinking in this session as a term, is a separate thing which we are talking about. Other thinking, critical thinking, rational thinking, basic thinking, critical thinking. Actually, I would like to propose to completely flip this around. That's what Ubaid Bhai said in the beginning. Actually, I look at it as thinking critically. I don't look at it as a separate body of think called critical thinking. It is the learning of human beings to think critically. Every time you think, we all think, as a sister asked this question a moment ago, okay, what is the biological process of thinking, whatever, and somebody can explain it. I would like to stay away from Deepak Chopra. I'll just add this comment because he's a fraud, but that's okay if you can share that. But coming back to the topic,
एक मिनट आरिफ भाई, just stop here please. आप कंटिन्यू करें, I will not stop you. Remember, उसमें इंटेलेक्चुअल में एक बात उसने की थी कि दूसरे को आप रिजेक्ट ना करें टोटली, ठीक है ना? वो इंटेलेक्चुअल में है, इंटेलेक्चुअल एम्पैथी और फेयर माइंडेडनेस में आता है.
I concede. We can listen to anybody.
That's fine.
लेकिन मैं छोटा सा बात करके इसको खत्म करता हूँ क्योंकि other people.
नहीं, आराम से आप बात करें. We should be able to.
मैं सिर्फ ये कह रहा था कि हमको जो जरूरत है, जिसकी उबैद भाई ने जिसकी एम्फेसिस की थी, मैं उसको बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है वो बात कि हम लोग इसको क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग को एक हवा ना समझें, एक अलग चीज ना समझें कि हमें अब ये सीखनी पड़ेगी. अभी एजाज रसूल साहब ने हमें बता दिया है, अब हमें पहले क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग में कोई चैंपियनशिप करनी पड़ेगी, किताबें पढ़ें, रिप्रेजेंटेशन देखें. नो, एक्चुअली द पॉइंट इज टू थिंक क्रिटिकली. How to think? One thing is thinking without thinking, just random thoughts. But whenever you get a thought, you have to think critically. जब भी आपके सामने कोई टॉपिक आता है, कि अभी पूछा था कि जी how to tell fake news or fake information from real. The only way you do it is by looking at it critically. कि एक मिनट ठहर जाएं, देखें इसमें क्या सच्चाई है, कहाँ से आ रही है, कौन बता रहा है, उसकी बेसिस क्या है, उसने क्या एविडेंस यूज किया है. That is the, I think, what we should talk about. How to learn to think critically and teach our children to learn to think critically. They become whatever they want to become in their life, but if they keep on learning to think critically, their thinking process will become better, their education will become better, and they will be better citizens. Muslims, yes, later on, but even today in the world, they will be better citizens. So thinking critically is a good thing to do. You should think critically on every case. Let's stop.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shah Riaz wants to. Then I'll come to Dr. Hamid Mia and then come to Brother Sarfraz. Shah.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment about cultures, because in my research, I've looked at different cultures. And for example, there are tribes in Africa that don't know the concept of organizing or classifying anything. We do this all the time. We classify people, books, different types of classification. But there's a tribe that doesn't know any classification. So there are different ways of thinking as well. So then it depends on culture, how the culture is. So, we all got to learn critical thinking. I think that's a good subject. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good lecture.
Dr. Hamid Miam. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ji. I think it was very comprehensive, your talk. It's very difficult to catch everything, but it has to be in bits and pieces. But I think it's an ongoing thing. जिस तरह बहुत ज़्यादा we talk about communication skills and that's critical thinking. Basically, Quran says, "Hatu burhanakum in kuntum sadiqin." If you are truthful in your talk, always provide evidence. Once you provide evidence, that means you are critically thinking. Same thing, if you are talking to someone, conveying your message truthfully, you are a good communicator. That's the bottom line of everything. Now, the question is, Quranic versus other thinkers, like Arif Bhai initially mentioned. If you look at Roman Empire and Persian Empire and look at the Arab at that time, Roman Empire and Persian Empire had a higher intellect and they were critically thinking. Today in United States and United Kingdom, they are critically thinking. They highly critically thinker and they created a lot of critical thinkers, Richard Dawkins, George Orwell, Bertrand Russells, majority of them are atheist. All right. So basically critical thinking take you to such a level where you are free and you are atheist. What I'm trying to say, at the same time when Persian and Roman empires were there were a group of people who got up, who received message, revealed message. They started thinking according to what they were provided, the values. If you think according to the values, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. Because if you go according to that, that becomes higher than critical thinking. Critical thinking leads you to atheism. You can highly think you can be most free of the world is atheism. They are the freest people, right? But here you have some guidelines, some restrictions where you are thinking in the parameters of some values. Once you attach value to a critical thinking, it becomes, that's where when we say, okay, this is Musalmanic thinking, but Musalman doesn't mean anything. Musalman means any people. When Mao Zedong was marching and the first fight with Chiang Kai-shek, with United States fully supported that war, and that the United States at that time was 50% of the whole world they had, and they lost the war. The two investigative journalists, they went there and they analyzed, United States sent them to analyze what really happened. And they came back and they said, no country can defeat that movement at that time, because they were doing what Muhammad was doing in Makkah, because they were after the poor people. So basically, when you are right in according to the values, then it's higher than a critical thinking. Critical thinking is only leads, I mean, it doesn't matter if a Muslim does or Chinese does or American does. American, when they adopted Lakat Karramna Bani Adam, when the Jefferson made the Constitution, he added some Quranic values, basically. So critical thinking means we all think critically, we all think also subconsciously, but we have to understand where the difference is. Normally, majority of the people, when they discuss any argument, they're not realizing what's the argument. Majority of the time, if you see few people discussing something, they don't know the real argument. We had an issue here, like they wanted to remove the vending machines from the schools, but that's not the argument. That's not the point. First, we have to determine what is the actual point we have to discuss. The actual point in this scenario is because the children are developing child obesity. That's the reason we have to. The actual argument is not removing the vending machine. So we always have to first determine what is the actual argument we are discussing. The other thing, the question they ask is, how do we think? Because it is the initial stages when a child born, he start internalizing every society which he's in. Like if I'm here in United States, I'm internalizing United States norms and abnorms. If somebody's in Pakistan, they are internalizing the norms and abnorms of Pakistan. So those things stays with us. All the data we collect as we grow, that becomes our basic thinking process. All the words, all the sentences we take in, all the pictures we take in, we think according to that. That your subconscious is a basic fundamental stage where you start thinking. And if you are, as the other fellow said, the environment we are living, if you watch 24/7 of CNN, your thinking is exactly what CNN is telling you. So you cannot think beyond that. So if you have to remove yourself from the environment and from those things, from your own emotions, because if any emotions of your come, then your thinking is biased. So same way, if any media is there and you're basing on CNN, then your opinion is to who to vote, what CNN has told you what who to vote. So this is how we develop our thinking. So critical thinking is away from everything. You even your emotions, you separate from them. And then Hatu burhanakum in kuntum sadiqin. Then once you are bringing evidence, once you're bringing the subut, the dalail, then you are talking. And all obviously there are so many biases, so many hurdles, so many in the critical thinking we have developed, especially in third world, where the teachers, the parents, our emotions, selfishness, ego, all these things comes in our in front of us, that it cannot let us think critically. So we have to remove a lot of things. It's a practice. It's you can improve it. There's no biological thing. There is no such thing genetically we think a certain way. It's all our data we have taken in our subconscious. On that basis, the way we think. So I think it's a very vast
Can I?
subject,
Hello,
but it
I
has
think
to be bits and pieces. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank-
Iftihar wants to comment.
Thank you
Iftihar,
very
sir.
much, Dr. Saab. I think before I'll just go to Sarfraz Saab, he wants to ask, and then I'll come to Iftikhar Bhai aap towards you. Sarfraz Bhai, आपने कोई comment करना है?
जी जी, मेरा ये मुख्तसर सा ये सवाल है कि जो हम बात कर रहे हैं क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग की, सबका लेवल डिफरेंट है. अब फॉर एग्जांपल आप कुरान पढ़ते हैं, यू स्टडी कुरान, एवरीबॉडी समटाइम्स they have higher thinkers and they grasp it in a different way, and then there are people who could not grasp it, the real meaning. Like for example, you're a high thinker and you comparing somebody who lives in this different environment, who has no education or nothing, but he's trying to improve themselves, reading it, obviously they cannot be on the same page like you. So my point is that, first of all, biological wo jo baat kar rahe hain, everybody has different, I think it's not the same way they can grasp it. I mean, the level of thinking they have, I think कुरान में भी मिलता है, कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो आयतें से आप मज़ीद रिसर्च कर सकते हैं कि हर एक की बात इस तरह समझ में नहीं आएगी और उनको फोर्स करने की भी ज़रूरत नहीं है. तो जो जैसा समझता है, आई थिंक अल्लाह ऑलरेडी न्यू अबाउट दिस. I mean, we cannot, I mean, Hamid, Dr. Hamid, Dr. Ijaz, yourself, the other group members, some of them probably would not be on the same page. Everybody has a different way, different level, the way they think, the way they grasp all the stuff. So my point is, I mean, are we going to force them
No.
to be on the same page, or let them think
No.
the way they can think and grasp it and then go from there?
No,
Talk to them. Hatu burhanakum in kuntum
सादिक,
sadiqin.
वो जो डॉक्टर साहब ने कहा है ना कि जो चॉइस है वो तो मेंटेन करना है. The thing is, there are 2 points in regarding this presentation which we shared today. First is, if I had not shared, it's lying in the literature and we would be able to make use of it. So there is something which people have already done over a period of time, and they have presented it and it appealed to us and we thought we'll share it, number one. It's not a sermon. It's not a sermon, please. It does not mean that I possess that kind of a critical thinking mind. What it all means is, this is again going back to assumption. So assumption over here is that each one of us have to think that how much of it I need to acquire and which can help me to have a better thinking. Remember at the beginning, they said that it's all about your own thought process. So in the process, if we recognize that what is within us, and how can I apply it, and how can I be aware of the environment in which we are living, because the environment around us is extremely volatile, number one. It is extremely influential. And number 3 is there's so much information is being thrown at us that we can become confused, and we should become confused because there are opposing information coming to us. So what we need to do is to give ourselves time, not to get under pressure, not to become fearful. That is the last thing which I would like anyone to become. And we should become rather optimistic that we have now certain tools with us which we can use and explore. And nowadays, in a situation of lockdown, we can explore it a lot. You know, we should go through that miniature handbook again, look at some of the videos and exchange views and try to come to grips with the world which is around us and with the world which we have created within us. You know, the world which we are creating within us, that is the important world. Because there is a lot going on outside the world. We can't import everything into our mind. We should only import into our mind which we think requires some kind of an attention. Others should be discarded. इफ्तिखार भाई आपने सवाल पूछना. Thank you very much.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम. मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
First class, A1.
थैंक यू. कई दफा मैं
अभी आपने म्यूट कर दिया. म्यूट
जी
फिर रिपीट करें आप. सॉरी.
मेरे दो सवाल हैं जी. एक तो उर्दू में आप क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग के क्या अल्फाज हैं? अगर किसी को कहें आप क्रिटिकली सोचें तो उर्दू में उसे कैसे कहेंगे? ये मेरा सवाल है. उसके बाद सना का भी अपना
क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग जो मैं आप बाकी और भी कोई तर्जुमा कर सकते हैं.
तनकीदी इसका होगा.
तनकीदी सोच या तनकीदी दिमाग कह लें.
बिल्कुल.
क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग का यहाँ पे मतलब किसी पे तनकीद नहीं करना. तनकीद से मुराद है कि अपने आप में वो विजन क्रिएट करना. आप सर्चिंग भी कह सकते हैं, तलाश करने वाला, हकीकत की तलाश.
थैंक यू. सना का सवाल है जी.
जी सना बेटी.
Salam everybody. I just have a comment. So as I'm observing everybody, there's some group dynamics that I'd just like to raise some awareness about. Number one, Uncle, your talk is great. I think that first, we must allow people to ask questions because what I'm noticing is that there's so many heavy comments that are being made and they're all really interesting, food for thought.
Could you, just a minute, sorry Sana, could you come closer to the mic please?
Yeah, G.
Because your voice is a bit echoing.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying that just some group dynamics that I'd like to raise awareness about is that certain people are repetitively speaking whilst others aren't being given a chance because we've been waiting for quite a while now. So I think that if there can be a systematic way of doing this, so we can go around and everybody can get to speak once. And the other thing is, I think questions regarding your talk, Uncle, specifically in the beginning, before we actually allow comments, because the comments, whilst they're great, they're quite in depth and they can go on and on. So it's not to discredit them, but I think that specifically for the talk that you're giving, the questions that people have regarding critical thinking, okay, how do I increase my awareness about this? Any specific questions that people have, I feel would be better if we address those first. And the comments, they can come after, but also with regards to the comments, I feel like we should reduce that. Otherwise, we're going, quite at length with time, and people that have questions may not really get to say them. And with regards to the comments, they are going sometimes outside of the topic area. So again, they may well be put forward in another topic if it is related to the talk that is being given. So if we could just please be a bit mindful of how we are presenting ourselves in the group, I think that would be really good. And I guess this also comes into self-awareness, which will help us to increase our critical thinking and try and to actually achieve onto all of the steps that you're saying with regards to it. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to highlight because I'm noticing this quite repetitively across the talks over the weeks.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think everyone has heard it, and we will move on. Any other question? Thank you.
Very good suggestions by Sana Beti.
I do have a comment.
There is one point over here. Sorry. Who wants to ask?
I'm on the phone actually. I'm not on video, so you guys can see me.
Okay, that's fine.
I do have a comment, and I mean, it was a great discussion that I've heard so far. Just wanted to point out a couple of things when Dr. Hamid said about how atheists have very free and higher level of critical thinking, but as if they don't have values and it leads to total freedom, as if it leads you to atheism. I do not think that happens. So values are universal and they are Allah's values. No one group owns it. Muslims don't own those values. Christians don't own those values and atheists don't own those values. If somebody's honest, they're honest. It doesn't matter if they're atheist or Muslim. So I don't think higher level of critical thinking leads to atheism. Second thing is that separating our, emotional reactions, and that's where I agree with Dr. Hamid about how all the nuances we pick up as a 1 or a 2-year-old child from our home setting kind of makes the way we're going to be as an adult, because we are taking in all that data, all the nuances around us, including body language of how my mother speaks to me, or whether I see my parents having a happy relationship. All those things actually affect our way of reacting and responding to our stimuli. And then as we get older or baligh or, capable of independent thinking, that's where Quranic values can guide us. And we can stop ourselves from one pathway of thinking is limbic system. Limbic system in our brain determines our instinctive response of fight, fright, and flight. And then there is a prefrontal cortex, which is where our higher thinking and executive function, decision making takes place. That, okay, if my hand is on fire and I'm burning, what am I going to do next to prevent my hand from burning? That requires my prefrontal cortex. And enough research has been done and has been shown that we can train those pathways. That's where meditation comes in, that's where mindfulness comes in, that you can create a space between your stimulus and your response. And that is what mindfulness actually is about. It's a way of meditating. So that's the way we can, so our own chemical pathways of thinking are the same in every person. But our limbic system, most people who are not able to think critically, their limbic system takes over. That's how they go in vicious cycle of making one bad decision after another, because every time they are angry, they go pick, let's say, a drink of alcohol. That's how alcoholism is, right? Because their learned pathways are based on their limbic system and not their prefrontal higher thinking cortex. And that's where we incorporate Quran. Quran gives us the guidelines. Quran does not give us values in the sense that values are universal. A Christian can have those values, a Yahudi can have those values, and an atheist can have those values. But Quran gives us the guidance of how to conform our higher thinking. That was it. That was my comment. Thank you.
No, the thing is that, sister, you have touched a far bigger now issue here, and we will leave it for another presentation, which I'll ask someone, or I can give it on permanent values from the Quran, and how do we apply them. So there are plenty of values in the Quran which human beings around us simply do not know. That is why we have a messy world. If we were following the Quranic values, we wouldn't have a mess in the world what we have, and we wouldn't have yatim and miskeen and billions, not in millions, billions as we speak. So let us leave that there, because it will be outside the scope of this presentation. But thank you very much for your points. I've noted them, and we will address them in some other question answer session. जी अतीक रहमान भाई, और कोई किसी का हाथ unmute कर लें please.
No, I would say that critical thinking has nothing to do with atheism. Critical thinking is a process, is a skill to learn. Everybody learns to think critically. It's nothing to do with atheism, Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, or anybody. It's a human function. So we're talking about two different things. I mean, we should not bring them and overlap them unnecessarily, confuse the issue. Absolutely. I mean, why even mention atheism in this discussion? There is no need. So I think that we need to be careful. We need to hold ourselves. We have too much knowledge exploding in our heads, and we want to put it forward and confuse everybody. So please, we need to take care of that. Don't call atheism anything to do with
No,
critical
no, no.
thinking. For God's
Let
sake.
me
Ek minute.
let me answer.
Dr. Sahab, I'll come to
Let
you.
me.
Let Dr. Shah Riaz answer it, and then I question it, and then I will
Okay.
come to you. I've noted that. Thank you, Brother Atiq, and I think you have hit the nail. That the whole thing of critical thinking is about the state of our own thinking, and what we do with it, that is a separate issue. You know, we have a tool, and we make use of it. As I said in one of my slides, that this is the one, intellectual standards, your own thought process, reasoning, and the skills. And we acquire a certain state of our mind. Now that state of mind we can use to become a Muslim or an atheist or a Christian or stay wherever we are. It is our choice. Shah Riaz, Dr. Shah Riaz, you wanted to ask something, then I'll
It's
come
just
to
a
Dr.
quick,
Hamid.
it's just a quick comment on Sana's thing about people waiting. If they can just use the app to raise their hands, then it's easier to go down that thing. You know, we can't see everybody on the app raising their hands. So, you know, if anybody needs help, contact me and I'll explain how to do that afterwards. Or you can look up Zoom. So raise hand. You can see the yellow hand above my icon or my video. That's all my comments. So it's
Yes.
easier.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Yes, if you
We
raise your
are
hand, I
waiting.
can see it very clearly, and
Yeah, we
co-host
can
can
see it.
see it as
Yeah.
well. And it becomes easier to come to
Yes.
yourself. जी डॉक्टर साहब अभी आपने कोई comment?
My statement is not that every critical thinker will become atheist. When critical thinking started in the West, majority, even if you take from the Greek civilization, they start thinking about the man, God, and universe. When they start pondering on that, all philosophers, they end up into atheism, because intellect will never let you go towards God. ये याद रख लें. इकबाल ने ये कहा था कि I came out of that because he was in philosophy too. When you get into deep philosophy, into knowledge, into human intellect, Karl Marx did the same thing. Every philosopher, if you look at it, they get into the position where they think the human intellect is more powerful, and they start thinking and they go even negate God. If you don't have Quran or values, permanent values in front of you, Iqbal said, because I knew the Quran, I came out of it. I was there. I was almost there. So what happened is, when you keep thinking who is God, you cannot figure it out. Okay. So you keep thinking about knowledge and human intellect, you end up questioning and end up started having doubts. I know that because I do that. And if you are critically thinking, if you are deep thinker, you will get to a point where you start developing doubts. But because you have a Quran in front of you, you don't get there. So I'm not saying every human gets to that point. But if you are only basing on your human intellect and the knowledge, be careful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. Any other question? We are, I think, coming to the end of
So
this.
Faraz has got another question.
Sorry, who?
Surprise.
Yes, please. Surprise me.
Okay, doctor, just tell me something about why most of the traditionals, the critical thinking is stopped when you talk about the Quran. They do critical thinking about their education, their careers,
They do
making
not.
money. But when you talk about Quran, the critical thinking, no left and right. They stop there. Why is that?
It is, see, this is where Brother Atik helped me actually to clarify, and Dr. Hamid Mia also, and others as well. See, that we should not assume that.
Basically, they have, if you go to United States and you want to write, they will give you a guidelines that this is how you're going to write. These are the guidelines. You cannot go beyond or inside. So if you already make some guidelines that you have to understand Quran within these guidelines, then basically they put you in a box. The moment somebody puts you in a box, you lose your critical thinking. So same way, when they start making these guidelines that you have to think Quran according to the hadith and the history what they created, then you cannot understand Quran. You cannot critically think. So same way, you cannot write good book if you follow the guidelines. Only all the people who have written good books, they didn't follow the guidelines. So it's human imagination is the best answer. So if you follow the guidelines, so all the four imams and previous people, they gave us guidelines how to think within the Quran. We can think. That's the reason.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Going back to Brother Sarfraz, I will add on that is that the difficulties we find in the world of religion is absence of critical thinking. The critical thinking today that we discussed are issues which we deal in our daily life, but we have to approach them without our egocentric thinking. The issues with us is that if we have held on to a belief and we are not willing to question that belief system, then we are not going to get out of it. Doesn't matter how much training we give to children or people. It is impossible. What people have to do is that themselves should be uncomfortable with the world in which they live, number one. Number two, they should be very uncomfortable with the poverty we see around us too. Number three, they should be very uncomfortable not knowing the importance of physical death. And then they should be very uncomfortable within the belief system they have. Because, for example, you have seen people again and again say that there should be no sects, sectarianism, or there should be no divisions. And the same people then go and divide themselves. The same people become members of some political parties. The same people become part of some kind of a sect or firqa or some kind of groups and categories. They subdivide themselves. So people have to come to this conclusion. Remember that I said intellectual integrity. That trait we have to develop. And we will work on that. My view is that today's talk is just a flavor of what is coming. There's a lot more to it. And we will try to apply it to lively examples and applications in our life, just to make sure that we stay together and think through these problems at our own as well. My view is a lot of time others provide us answers. And since we are not looking for those answers, we tend to forget it. But if we find out the answers ourselves through our own effort, then it is more likely that it will appeal to us and we'll be able to not only understand ourselves, but we will be able to share it with others. So this is my view that there is no shortcut to it. We have to have a critical mind first, a critical thinker first, and resolve some of our own inner contradictions which we have. I don't want to go into more frank comments, but if we observe ourselves over a period of, let's say 2, 3, 4 days and see how much issues we have with our own thinking and understanding it. So we have to raise our level of awareness. Remember, under intellectual traits, I had said that it is about increasing the expanse of our consciousness. So our consciousness has a certain state, let's say X state. So we have to make it X plus 1, X plus 2, X plus 3 with every passing day. Thank you very much.
Let me give one more comment.
Yes,
please. La ilaha illallah. If you go through human intellect, the la ilaha is the atheist level of human thinking. We all do we all become atheists first. If we are developing our second life, second birth, we have to become atheist. Why? All the religious belief we had in the past, we have to negate everything to come to a human intellect level. La ilah. So after la ilah is illallah. So people do achieve atheism and then find God. So atheism, some stays at atheism and then they don't find God, or they don't have a Quran in front of them. So all human who goes through human intellectual base and remove all these previous beliefs goes through the atheism and then get to the God.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. I think your presentation last Sunday has covered a lot of it in that and the previous one.
La ilaha is the atheist maqam.
Should we call it a day? And thank you very much for your participation. I think we have run out of questions and I have run out of answers as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Okay.
Take care, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Allah Hafiz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.